Kevan Chandler has had to be dependent on others his entire life. Kevan relies on a wheelchair to get around, and of course there's a lot of limitations of where he can go. So how did this young man travel all over Europe, going up hills, mountains, and rough terrain? Well, we are going to find out. Kevan, great to have you on 100 Huntley Street.
Yeah, thank you.
So you grew up in North Carolina, a home where people love Jesus. Tell me about your upbringing.
Yeah, my parents are really amazing, and I have an older brother and a sister as well. And before I even came along, when my sister was about a year old, she was diagnosed with spinal muscular atrophy, which is a disability that they didn't know a lot about back in the 80s, but she would end up in a wheelchair. And so when she was diagnosed, the doctors kind of told my parents that any more kids you have will be the same case, and they decided that that was okay with them. And about a year and a half later, I came along.
And you're glad that your parents chose that, right?
Yeah, I am.
You know, again, we're going to talk more about your book as well, but the thing that really comes very clearly is your love for your parents and how encouraging they were. Because, again, you had, the similar situation as your sister with limitations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and, I really grew up in a home where you wake up in the morning and you say, well, what do I want to do and what can I do? And you just find something in the middle, which is pushing your limitations and realizing what you're really capable of, and really doing that with the people around you. And whenever I was really young, that was my parents and their friends, and that sort of trained me as I grew up to involve my friends, and that's kind of where I am now.
So tell me, Kevan, about your limitations. You, of course, are in a wheelchair. You have very little ability to move your limbs. Tell me about some of those restrictions that you have.
Yeah, so I'm in the wheelchair all the time as far as transportation goes, and so I can't use my legs or my right arm, and some of my left arm. Don't have that great of balance either, but we still make it work. I still get around.
But your limitations, again, I think this really comes back to your parents and your faith in Jesus, that you went to university, you got a degree in counseling, so you didn't kind of have a pity party. You just said, hey, I'm going to go for it. I have these limitations, but I am going to do something with my life.
Yeah, there really wasn't much time to have a pity party. There have been times where you kind of stop and you realize, just how you do have limits, and you have that moment of reality check, and then you say, all right, well, realizing this, what am I going to do? And my parents, my dad is a airplane mechanic, and my mom has started and run 3 crisis pregnancy centers and all over the States. And so definitely from a background of not giving up and looking for creative solutions.
Now, you're a pretty positive guy. It comes through in your book and as we've met today. But, I mean, you've had to be dependent upon people. And that must be frustrating at times because, I mean, even during the night, you have to be turned and, doing the basic things that we all sort of take for granted. Was there ever a bitterness, Kevan, that got into you?
There's never really been a bitterness, or at least anything that lasts very long. There's certainly moments of frustration, because I'm interacting with people all the time, and I think it's a rich experience to have people helping people and living in community, but we're also, at the end of the day, we are broken, and so there are moments of frustration, either on other people's end or mine, and whoever's at fault. There are those situations, but I also get up in the morning because someone gets me up and serves me from the moment I wake up, and gets me in the shower and gets me ready for the day. And then throughout the day, I have people help. And that's such a picture of Christ, just literally in front of me in a physical, tangible way. So I'm thankful for that.
Okay, Kevin, when we come back, we're going to talk about this journey that you went on. It's absolutely amazing. Not only do you have incredible parents, but you have some pretty incredible friends. And we're going to meet one of those guys when we come back on 100 Huntley Street. Stay with us. Well, Kevan Chandler, even though he was bound to a wheelchair, wanted to go to places in Europe that were not exactly wheelchair accessible. So, Kevin, tell me how that dream and maybe the possibility of even being able to fulfill that came about.
Yeah, well, you know, with the family that I grew up with, we did a lot of traveling around the U.S. and Canada, and a lot of flying and road trips and stuff like that. But I also wanted to go to Europe, and I knew the things that I wanted to do were not going to be accessible. So most of my life I'd kind of written it off and thought, well, maybe one day, but I don't know how. And a few years ago, some of the friends that I have traveled with a little bit, and some that I had lived with and had learned to help me to some extent, I said, well, what if we tried doing this? What if we went to Europe and took some other way to travel those areas? And we came up with a backpack for them to carry me in, and started with a child carrier and kind of built it up from there to fit me, and ended up leaving my wheelchair behind to do that.
It's an amazing story. By the way, it's in the book, We Carry Kevin. 6 friends, 3 countries, no wheelchair. And one of those 6 friends, Ben Duvall, is with us. Ben, welcome to 100 Huntley Street. So you guys, first off, you go in the sewer system to learn how to backpack. Then you join the team. Tell me how this all came about, that you're going to, because you're one of the carriers of taking Kevin around. Tell me how that really became something that thought, yeah, we can do this.
Absolutely. So I actually am guilty of saying that I was not supportive of the plan from the get-go. He came home and told me about it, and I told him that he was a little crazy. Didn't really think it was going to happen, and so after that, that's when doors started opening, and we really started to get a solid team together, and finances started to come in, and that's for me, really when the Lord just showed me, like, this is actually a thing. Start prepping your heart to get ready to find ways to serve on this team.
You know, as I was reading the book, and you guys are, you know, doing different kinds of backpacks, trying to figure it out. Poor Kevin, he's being tortured a little bit in this, but you eventually found something that worked.
Yes, we did. So we actually went down to North Carolina, where he was, where he grew up at, and went to a sporting goods store, tried out a few different backpacks. And a gentleman named Tom on the photo was the one who carried him around the store quite a few times. And we settled on one backpack that at the time kind of worked for Kevin, but we knew that we were going to have to make some tweaks to it. And so, yeah, started out there and then started making tweaks to it, trying to figure out what would work best for his body.
And eventually you found something that worked.
We did, yes.
So Kevin, you get over to Europe, and I know, because we don't have a lot of time, so get the book. It's great. I mean, it's an adventure, no question about it. But there were many highlights. Tell me about the highlight where you were on an English countryside, and it goes back to a trip that you and your buddies were on back in the States, and you had this idea. So tell me about that one.
Well, so we went to England about halfway through our trip, and so people were starting to get comfortable with how to do this carrying thing, and so we thought we'd go out into the countryside and do some hiking. And about near the end of that hike, which turned out to be an all-day experience, we got near the end. We were up on this crest of a hill about to go back down into the town, and Tom was carrying me, and he was kind of the ornery one of the group. And so he stopped and said, "This is a good spot." And I didn't realize what he was talking about. But he had the guys help him take me off his back, and they set me in the backpack on the ground on top of this hill, and they left. And he reminded me as he walked away that this is what I wanted, because a few months earlier, he and I had been on a road trip and going through, I think we were in Ohio, which is a lot of open fields.
Yeah, like our prairies.
Right,
in Canada,
exactly.
yeah.
And I told him, I said, if I was able-bodied, I would not be able to get anywhere, because I would just constantly pull off the highway and run out into the middle of these fields and just be there on my own. And just me and God, and no distractions. And so he had kept that in mind. And now we were out in the middle of the countryside, just surrounded by green. And he said, we're going to leave you here on your own. And so they left me, I don't know how long it was, but it was for a while. And just really had a precious moment with the Lord on my own, and realizing that I was there because of the love of these guys to carry me there and literally put me there. And so just realizing how that translates into the love of Christ.
Yeah, it's a beautiful story. I must admit, I got a little teary-eyed when I read that part. Ben, what did you learn out of this experience? I mean, there's a lot of, I'm sure it was not easy at times, but I mean, a big part of this is the friendship. But tell me what the thing that you took away most from this experience.
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, joining the team, I didn't really have a very tangible job. So we had Philip, who was doing a lot of the trip planning, Tom, who was doing a lot of the work on the backpack customization and working with some other people in that. Robbie came on the team late, but his job was kind of the health side of things. So I was like, okay, well, what can I help with? So for me, it was like Kevin's care, personal care, helping train the guys to do that, and then just prayer, kind of thinking through the different troubles and potential issues that might come up, and really just taking those before the Lord and saying, Lord, you can do what you want with this trip. We are going forward open-handed, trusting you. So for me, it really was building faith in me to see these things come to fruition and see the different ways that the Lord answered, maybe not in how we plan them, but he definitely answered in his good and perfect timing.
And how about you, Kevin? What would you say was the one thing, if you could boil it down to one thing that you took away from this experience?
I mean, I think just like we were talking about with England, that I got to see the love of Christ through these guys, just lived out in a day-to-day experience, and the fact that it was a very intentional decision every day. Because whenever I'm home, it's still amazing and profound that I have all this help, but I am in my wheelchair. Whereas with this trip, they would carry me around on their back all day, and we'd get home, and everyone would be worn out, and I still needed help because I didn't have a chair, and so it was a 24/7 for 3 weeks, and it was just this such a beautiful, intentional care for another person, and the fact that we had to do it together, and something that we really decided early on was that it wasn't just a trip for Kevin, but it was us as a group of friends. And this is what we wanted to do, and so this is how we had to do it, and that was fine by us. and so just to see their sacrifice day in and day out so selflessly was really profound for me.
Well, you're an inspiration, Kevin, and so are you, Ben. And again, the friendship part of it is absolutely amazing. The dependency that you have on others, but we all have a dependency on God. So if you want to read the rest of the journeys for Kevin and his buddies, We Carry Kevin, 6 friends, 3 countries, no wheelchair. And if you'd like to find out more about what Kevin is doing today, We Carry Kevin, it's a nonprofit organization. He does public speaking. You can find him on the internet. In fact, while he's here in the Toronto area, he's visiting the Children's Hospital and speaking and encouraging people. So thank you guys for coming. Really wonderful meeting you, and continue to go strong.
Thank you.
We'll be right back.